And
Love.
now we are live here
Yeah.
in our page. Thank you so much. So guys, for all of you who are watching, please let us know we are using StreamYard. So if you haven't clicked it yet, allow StreamYard to allow your name to be shown so that we can know that it's you who is commenting and that you're there. So today is very, very, very special episode. We move our time slot an hour earlier to
Thank you.
accommodate, of course, a very, very special guest. And don't worry, it will all be worth it because he's one of the best person I feel like really, really jumped up our level of low carb fasting and feasting in our communities. We are also live in Life Without Rice, and also we will share it to our Global TV network and Good People TV network so that they can know that they are here. So I am Dr. Josephine Grace Rojo, also known as your diet doctora. But the more important person for today is actually Mr. Marty Kendall. So
Hey,
hello, Marty.
everybody.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much. So I will give a short opening for you, but I want
yeah.
them to hear from you. So for those of you who don't know Marty yet, Marty is the founder of Optimizing Nutrition. So it is a founded in Brisbane, Australia, right? Is that right?
Yep.
And then we will talk more how it started. But if I can say one thing, it's one thing that you can really see later how Marty was able to engineer his way and so many thousands of people's way towards optimizing health. So optimizing nutrition, I've been using the term many times, how to optimize our health, how to optimize nutrition. And then there is Optimizing Nutrition by Marty Kendall, who is a civil engineer by profession. So
Correct.
Marty, please tell us something about yourself so that our viewers who are already commenting, we have Jelly, Rhea Salamanca, Noridek, and Marvi, of course, from Batangas. Mostly Filipinos, but we have viewers all over the world. So tell us about
Yeah, this
yourself.
is great. We've got 107 people watching, and yeah, this is really exciting. You're obviously doing an amazing thing, Grace, with all these amazing people. Yeah, I'm just an engineer by day, and happened to marry someone with type 1 diabetes, and just fell into the rabbit hole of trying to understand blood sugars and insulin, and then nutrient density, and then satiety, and trying to bring all those things together to dial in nutrition for different goals for different people with different dietary prescriptions. So yeah, it's obviously a massive need for people across the world to know what they should eat to reach their goals, whether that be diabetes management or weight loss. Often they're related, or you're a growing child, or you're an athlete and you need to get a lot of energy in. And I suppose the central component of all of that is nutrient density, making sure you get the nutrients you need, and then
Yes,
enough energy, but not too much energy. And a lot of us have,
yes.
eating foods that drive us to eat a lot more than we need to. So how do we reverse engineer that to help us not to
Yes.
eat too much?
So I think for those of you who do not know Marty, so Marty is an engineer. Again,
Yep.
she fell in love and got married to someone who was born with type 1 diabetes. So we've discussed it before. Diabetes is one of the major causes of
Mm.
Philippine disease because as much
Mm.
as we do not have actually people who are like extremely obese, but we have one of the highest numbers of diabetes. So
Mm.
diabetes, guys, for those of us who are listening right now, diabetes can be type 1, can be type 2,
Mm.
can be gestational. And there's even an emerging uh, call for diabetes type 3, which is
Mm.
an Alzheimer's
Alzheimer's.
induced by diabetes, which is
Mm.
basically
Mm.
brought about by too much sugar. So for those of you, I know a lot of Filipinos are now in type 2 diabetes, although there's already an emerging number of type 1. So type 1 mostly is that the pancreas is really incapable of producing insulin. So it is usually wrongly termed as juvenile or congenital diabetes because it's
Mm.
usually found in the young as an
Yep.
autoimmune disease. So
Mm.
they were mostly born with it because their body is attacking their own pancreas.
Mm.
And we can see that those people are somewhat what we also see as insulin dependent,
Mm.
whereas compared to type 2 diabetes, so it's mostly lifestyle induced and it's really not a problem of production of insulin, but mostly more on insulin that is no longer that sensitive, no
Mm.
longer that functioning as it should be. So those are the difference, but it has something to do with so much, even if they're different types, because the amount of insulin that you will need will so much differ on the amount of food that you eat.
Mm.
So for those of you who have family members who are insulin diabetic, they you know that they are given baseline basal insulin, so the ones they given at night, and there's also insulin that is preprandial or
Mm.
before meals, and there's even
Mm.
postprandial. It's like already a given that you will really exceed your carbohydrate intake and you will need more than the insulin that you already have. So
Yeah.
there's also a dosage of extra insulin should you eat more of that. So but we learned now that it's not just about getting being dependent in insulin. So insulin is a very good drug, but it shouldn't be the end all be all need.
Yeah.
Yes, we need for especially for type 1 diabetics, we still need insulin, but we can make it to the very very low baseline level. So
Mm.
I really like your emphasis on not just considering on the calories coming that is a source of energy. So for those of you guys, I know you've been a part of Life Without Rice and low carb feasting and fasting community. We're always focusing on low carb or lesser in carbohydrates. So whenever we say low carb, actually, we are practically addressing half of the problem. That
Mm.
is too much sugar. That's
Mm.
when there's too much sugar, there's too much insulin, and we know already that insulin will have so many illness. It could be the root cause of
Mm.
majority of the problems that we have now. Even the deaths from COVID have underlying
Mm.
insulin problem or insulin resistance problem. But the
Mm.
importance with optimizing nutrition of Marty, I recommend you following that page as well, optimizing
Thank you.
nutrition. And also you can have a browse, you make it your favorite his website, optimizingnutrition.com. It has a lot of free everything that you can make use, even macro calculator. And he is not lying when he says he is priding himself with providing free stuff that is usually being given for how being paid by many for even lesser quality. So it's really good. So the very important part of not just low carb. It's actually what else is there. So it is
Mm.
nutrition. So
Mm.
Marty, I've browsed through your website, even the LCF masterclass enrollees, the graduates last
Yeah.
weekend, we were able to browse your website. They know now how
Thank
to
you.
maneuver it, how to look at the recipes, how to look at the vitamin deficiency, and even the kind of foods that are naturally found,
Mm.
where we can naturally find those illness.
Mm.
So before you as a background, I know a lot of us has this background for low carb. It's mostly personal. So
Mm.
it's usually from our loved ones. So it's you from your wife.
Mm.
And I saw that you have this data driven fasting,
Yeah.
or it's coming from a hunger training. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you can tell us something about this, maybe for someone who doesn't have any idea what is hunger training, can
Yeah.
you tell us something about it?
Yeah. I suppose it revolves around the idea that most of us are eating more than we need to, more often than we need to, and the
Mm,
foods that we eat tend to drive us to eat a lot more. Especially the combination of fat and carbs together, they just drive this hyperpalatable binge response. All the junk foods, I suppose hundreds of years ago when the Asians mainly ate rice alone,
mm,
those foods are really hard to overeat. But once we combine those with oil and rice and fat and carbs together, we just tend to keep eating more and more and more and more than we need to. And that's when we become diabetic, and Asian people tend to develop diabetes at an earlier level. I think they've got less personal fat threshold, so they can't fill up their fat stores as much before they overflow. So
mm,
the data driven fasting is just a simple way of treating your blood sugars like I would with like Moni would watching her blood sugars come down. You don't want to overfill your glucose when it's still high. So if your blood sugar is high, you really need to wait. And then the data-driven fasting is just a way of using a simple glucometer, really cheap. Most people, especially if they've got diabetes, have already got one. And they can just use their blood sugar to understand whether they really need to refuel, whether they need more energy. And over time, that tends to calibrate, and you go, yeah, I'm not really hungry. There was something else I was wanting, and there was another reason for my hunger. Or yeah, I did actually feel a sensation of hunger. I felt, lightheaded. I felt distracted. I felt my tummy rumbling. There was a reason that I actually felt hungry, and then you learn to trust your actual true hunger. So then eventually you don't need that crutch anymore. You can just eat normally, eat healthily when you're actually hungry. And we've just seen great results with people using this technique. We've got a group running with 1,300 people at the moment, which is going really well. And just the rate of weight loss and blood sugar improvement is really amazing as people chase a lower pre-meal blood sugar. So they start out at a certain level, and then over time that reduces, and they sort of wait until that level, and then it reduces a little bit more, and they just sort of through just titrating it down slowly, they get to a point where their blood sugars are quite low, and they once you reduce the blood sugar, all the body fat flows out of storage, and it's all happy from there.
So it's really good. So for those who are first-time listeners, when it comes to low-carb nutrition, we are actually trying to lower down our glucose. Okay, so it's important for you, for beginners here, that we are actually not after lowering our fats, lowering our blood pressure right there and there, lowering our say for example our degree of inflammation or whatever we have to encounter, or even lowering our weight. But what we are trying to lower to is our blood glucose. So why do we need to prioritize our blood glucose first? It is because our blood glucose will give us the idea if our insulin is also increasing. Because if your sugar is increasing and your insulin is also increasing, your fat loss will never happen. Your drop in your blood sugar will never happen. And overall, you will still be diabetic. You might have a good HbA1c, but because simply you are taking 2, 3, or 4 medicines in a day. So you are actually not healing, but you are taking medicines to cover up the real score when it comes to your overall blood sugar impact and your overall insulin level. So what's the difference with Marty's strategy as compared to most low carbers and keto groups actually? Because most keto groups are always looking into ketones. They have urine ketone meter. They also have a ketone breath meter and even blood samples for ketones. But with DDF or data-driven fasting, so it sounds so overwhelming, the data-driven fasting, but it essentially means that your fasting will not depend just on something subjective. It will not just depend because you're used to eating during this time, or it's made up because your mother already cooked and you will break your fast. So it will no longer be related to that. You will now break your fast if you know for sure that your body really needs to refuel. So that was what Marty is saying. So each of us, I learned that we have. I think I've always known that, but it's different when you said it and made a label on it as a hunger trigger level. So it really sticks. So for those of you who are first time to hear this, whenever we feel hungry, more often than not, we have this kind of steady state baseline level of hunger when it comes to our level of blood sugar. So say, for example, if I'm someone who is already so used to low carb and so used to fasting, maybe I feel hungry when my blood sugar is already around 80 or say, for example, 75. But for someone who is diabetic or who have been in high carb diet for so long, they actually feel that hunger level, even if their blood is actually not hypoglycemic, even if it's 130, 140, or 150, simply because that's what we actually say as a relative hypoglycemia, not a real hypoglycemia, because real hypoglycemia should be below 70. Okay,
Yeah.
so but if someone is already feeling those manifestations like trembling, they already have cold sweats, they feel like fainting, and of course growling of stomach, they all thought that they're already hypoglycemic. So what they
Mm.
do is they eat right away, and the worst thing that they eat is a very very insulin spiking food
Yeah.
like a rice, a candy, and worse, a chocolate
Yeah.
candy. So it's not even real chocolate. So
The fat
it's
and
just a
carbs
chocolate.
together.
Yes, it's just chocolate
Yeah.
flavored candy. So with Marty's findings, because how long have you been doing this again?
We've been doing it in a large group for about a year, and then we
Okay.
developed the concept in a blog post about 4 years ago, and then a year
Yeah,
ago,
because
I thought,
I
let's
saw
give it a crack
some
and
posts.
ramp it up.
Yes, I think I saw some posts way back in 2016, or at least the very
Yeah,
basic
yeah, that's
concept
right.
of
That's right.
data-driven fasting.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like going 5 years already, but you are.
Yeah,
I see you making this DDF challenge, so data-driven fasting
yeah,
challenge monthly. I think since last year, since
yeah,
early last year, and
yeah.
I've seen a lot of results. So with
Mm,
this, you no longer need to really become so focused on your ketones, or if you're doing it right or what, because you're simply going to be very objective. You no
mm,
longer have to feel the guilt or the
mm,
confusion if you're
mm.
probably cheated or what. You will even know certain foods, the impact of those foods to your
Yeah.
system. So
Yeah,
if
people
I
learn a
have
lot about the food they eat from watching their blood sugar and their response,
yes,
and they learn to
exactly.
avoid the ones that keep their blood sugar elevated for a long time. And they go, "Oh, okay, that donut was a
Yes,
bad idea because I didn't get to eat for 10 hours. But if I eat a higher protein percentage food, they can eat again in a few hours, and it gives
yeah.
the key is to give your body what it needs and not wait so long that you drop so low that you're going to eat anything and everything and make really poor food choices at that point, because you don't make great progress at that point when you eat low satiety, hyperpalatable food that you can just eat way too much of.
Okay. So I think those are the things that is very important, especially because most of our viewers actually are not really beginners when it comes to low carb nutrition.
Mm,
So, but it's just that the also are also not that well adept when it comes
mm,
to the nutritious kind of low carb. I
mm,
understand that to start this process, sometimes we just have to take in the very simple concept, which is
mm,
the lower sugar, lower carbohydrates.
mm,
But we have to emphasize that it's not just about lowering our carbohydrates and sugar, but we have to also emphasize that whenever we take something low in carbohydrates, it should be high in nutrients. Okay.
mm,
And if
definitely.
we can, it should be high also in satiety point. So what is
Mm,
satiety point? So satiety is the sense of satisfaction that you feel when it comes to food intake. I saw your graph where you put where certain foods are when it comes
yeah,
to nutrition and when it comes to satiety. And I've always suspected this, and it proved my suspicion that
yeah.
the nuts are highly nutritious, but they are very low in satiety. That's
Yeah,
why people who are fond of eating nuts cannot stop eating,
yeah,
because
totally.
simply because it will not make you satisfied.
Mm,
So it's the problem there is, even if we are eating low carb, but if it doesn't have much nutrition, so your
mm,
body will still be nutrient dense, nutrient deficient. So
mm,
meaning part of your body is still starving. So when
mm,
there is that kind of starvation, you will tend to look for more food. You will tend to eat.
mm,
You will tend to overeat even.
mm,
And the worst thing that you can do is to eat food that are low in satiety level,
mm.
because you will and low in satiety level, but very high in calories. I think one of the perfect example is really nuts. Even if it's Brazilian nuts, even if it's almond nuts, which is way better than peanuts, but still, those are very caloric dense foods that you can easily overeat,
Yeah,
and you don't know how much you've eaten. You're actually eating more proteins, more fats,
mm,
more phytotoxins even that are in there sometimes if you overeat them. So those are the things that I really learned from your studies, from optimizing nutrition, that I
yeah,
also want to make our viewers aware. And how about the pre-meal blood glucose monitoring as
Yep.
compared to early morning monitoring? So say, for example, I know that with data-driven fasting, it's good to check your early morning glucose
Yep.
so that you will know the impact of your previous
Mm.
day's food intake. And I usually tell them that if it's too high, then maybe you've eaten more in amount or more in
Yeah.
carbohydrates, or maybe you've eaten too late.
Yeah,
Okay,
you
so
nailed the night
because I,
before with too much, and maybe you
yes,
delayed it too late, and then you got really hungry at night
yes,
and you ate a whole lot of
you just,
food and
yes, you just called it dinner, but it's actually midnight snacks. So those
it
kinds.
kept
So
on
those are
going.
the Yeah, so it's important also that I usually recommend doing circadian fasting if they can,
Yeah.
if their schedule allow them to. So that is eating dinner just not after sundown, or at least
Mm.
not way too late if after
Mm.
sundown.
Mm.
So another thing is, sorry, I got a feedback. So another thing would be the pre-meal blood glucose. So I think among the four, monitoring pre-meal blood glucose is the most important. So for
Yeah.
you guys who are watching, pre-meal blood glucose is the blood glucose level that you have before you eat, but it doesn't need to be on a fixed time because people
Mm.
think I will eat, I will check my blood glucose and then I will inject my insulin and then I will eat. So I think that's the saddest way to do it. But
Mm.
if you will use pre-meal blood glucose to your advantage, you will actually start hunger training.
Yeah.
So what Marty and I was saying a while ago is that our body has different hunger trigger level.
Mm.
Okay, so if you can wait a little until it's really really hypoglycemic, or at least it is normal blood sugar level, then that's
Yeah.
the time to eat. Okay,
Yeah.
so initially you can have 3 4 days of just knowing what is your hunger trigger level. So we can give an example. So say for example 120 milligrams per DL level of your hunger level, and then maybe on the fourth day or the fifth day you can try to not eat first and wait until it drops to, say for example, 110. How much usually
Yeah.
is your lowered increment so the people can slowly ease in?
Yeah, yeah. So we do a baselining and we find out when you usually eat and when you usually get hungry for 3 days, and then after 5 days of just waiting and until you hit that level, we then start to drop it slowly from there. So it might go from 120 to 118 to 116 if you're consistently
Oh,
getting underneath it. So it
okay.
only drops by 0.5% per day, and that just helps people wait a little bit longer without going too long to the point that they get that binge instinct and fall off the wagon
Oh,
and get full of guilt and
yes.
feel like a failure. And it's all that mind game that you're
Oh,
playing with,
yes.
your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala, your lizard brain that we call it, that make peace and give Lizzie what it wants.
Yes, because I think if you are already way past that point, there no willpower can ever
Mm,
control you to eat. Okay,
yeah.
so the most important thing here, guys, is that once you know your hunger trigger level, you want to slowly train yourself
Mm,
to be used to eating on a lower trigger level,
mm,
then you slowly ease in little by little. So say for example from 120 on the next day you can try at 118 and then at 116, because I know also there are people who are somewhat ready to jump right then and there, and maybe they want to wait until 90 right there and there, but that is
yeah.
not advisable, right?
Yeah, a lot of people start fasting and they go, "Oh, I've got a lot of fat to lose, so I'm going to wait a week and not eat for a week, and more is better." But at that point, they just eat indiscriminately and keep on eating, and they often they can't get enough nutrients, especially protein, at that point. So they end up losing lean muscle mass and then just gaining fat when they refeed. So eventually, they're just going to end up skinny fat, which is really a bad metabolic outcome that is not going to be good for their diabetes in the long term. So yeah, just waiting long enough that you're actually hungry, but you can still make good food choices at that point when you're actually hungry, and higher nutrient density, higher protein percentage, and then that switches off the hunger again, and you can eat again sooner without having to wait forever.
Yeah. So I think it's very good also because we are not just looking into like the medical and physical aspect, but also the psychological aspect of this
Mm.
healing. So for those of you who are in a hurry to heal, please remember how long you've been actually trying to destroy your metabolism, your health with our food choices. So we are lucky that we are able to find this way of
Mm,
life, that we've discovered before it's too late. But
mm,
for many of us, at least a decade, at least 2 decades of poor food choices that we've wasted. And
mm,
hurrying to heal right there and then might actually be very, very problematic when it comes to
mm,
that, because otherwise we won't have that sustainable outcome. And I've
mm,
seen your graph, even I think weight loss. Understand, guys, that we are just using weight loss because it's like one of the most easiest to assess. Okay,
mm.
but we all know that weight is not the best gauge of health. There can be so many other factors, but for the sake of discussion and illustration, Marty was able to see the improvements of people using other gauges of health.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
compared
The body
to
fat
eating,
and blood
yes,
sugars and waist, they all improve really nicely, actually. As you drop your blood glucose, your body fat is able to flow back out of storage. And yeah, it just seems to work really well rather than trying to
yes.
track calories or just rely on eating low carb, which often leads people to eat too much fat at that point. So,
Okay, so one of our commenters really said, "Please allow you to speak." I'm so sorry. We are so excited. So,
you're
Marty,
so
please.
enthusiastic. I love it, Grace.
Yeah, they're so into there. We really have a very, very great audience right now. So, how about seasonal fasting and feasting? And what are your views? Since not everybody in the world got 4 seasons, so we always say
Yeah,
that we are on perpetual autumn. But how about
yeah.
us in the Philippines where there's no autumn? What can you say about that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I suppose a lot of my understanding comes from like thinking of it in terms of we're in this, like we said, we're in this perpetual autumn where we're always eating these fat and carb foods together that are rare in nature, but come in autumn and trigger this binge response to get us ready for winter, and then we go around to winter, and then which is sort of a low carb approach, and then spring, which is sort of a protein and fiber, protein spring modified fast, low fat, low carb, and then summer, and then we go around, but we're just stuck in this perpetual autumn. But yeah, um, I think our whole food system is set up to be in that perpetual autumn everywhere. Everybody's getting taking in the Asian countries potentially. Not that I've been there, but it seems that there's a lot of rice, and now they've just added infinite oil to that rice. So it's just that autumnal
Yeah,
combination of foods that drives us to overeat. So we need to back out both the fat and the carbs and try to focus on nutrients. You think of the fat and the carbs as energy, and you
mm,
just need the nutrients. If you've got more stored energy in body fat than you need in high blood sugars, you don't need more fat or carbohydrates really, and you just need the nutrients. So your glucose can
yeah,
be used for fuel, which is the carbs, and then your body fat can be used for fuel as well. And yeah, if you
yeah.
give your body what it needs, the nutrient density, then you're much more satiated at that point.
Yeah. So for thank you for that. So for our the benefit of our listeners, we have to emphasize that food is not just for energy, but food is also for nutrition. And
Oh, very
nutrition, by
much.
nutrition, we mean not calories, but the vitamins and minerals. So we
Mm,
have lots
mm,
of vitamins and minerals. And in fact, we can live with very little calories, but what we
mm.
cannot live is very little nutrition. Okay?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we have the necessary way to save calories in form of fats, in form of our glycogen, but our body has very limited stocks of nutrients that it needs, especially on a day-to-day
Yeah,
basis. Okay, so
yeah,
that's why we really need to supplement on that, and as much as possible, the most natural way to do it is to get them directly from our food.
yeah. People
So
seem to do so much better when they get their nutrients from food. I was just
yes,
talking to a lady earlier today and another one last weekend that was taking all these supplements and trying to fast and deprive
different.
themselves. But once they give their body the nutrients it needs from whole food, everything just
Yes,
seems to fall into place, and your body goes, okay, this is what I need. I don't need to we're not in a famine. We're not storing fat for an
Yes.
emergency. We've got everything we need. We've got good food here.
It's like
We can
assurance for your
let
body.
go of the fat. What was that?
It's like assurance. It's like you're giving your body
Yeah,
an assurance that you don't need to store fats. We're okay. We're good. We're well fed. We have everything. It's abundant
exactly,
time, and there's
exactly.
no famine coming. Because
Yeah.
I think the problem with regular low carb, that is not nutritionally dense low carb, it's
Mm,
setting in the body on a starvation mode, hunger, famine times, and then
mm,
comes feasting. It's time to get all those fats again, all
mm,
of those nutrients again, and save all those again. And then
mm,
after another period of fasting and another period of very strict low carb, and the worst kind is low calorie low carb, but also no low nutrient low carb. That's why there are
mm,
so many side effects like hair loss,
mm.
like weakness, and they
Yeah,
some really look even older, even if
yeah,
others most are claiming that it's making us younger, but for those who are not doing it right, you can really see that it's not doing them good. So
yeah. You,
it's
you
good
definitely
that
need the
yes,
protein and nutrients to build a strong body that will be resilient when you're 60, 70,
yes,
80. But you're still independent and mobile and strong and not relying on somebody else to feed you and take you to the toilets. And, at that point, if you've
yes,
deprived yourself of nutrients, especially protein, yeah, you're not going to be strong. And so many people fall
yes,
over and break their hip. And at that point, that so many of them don't get out of the
yes,
medical system ever again after they have a major fracture because they've become weak.
mm,
And so, yeah, you
yeah,
really need to prioritize investing in your body and making it strong and resilient as early as you can, and not being over fat. And yeah,
and yes, and about proteins, I for those of you we've been talking about whole foods, but we're not actually just right after like full plant based or full carnivore. I think Marty and I both believe that the best nutrition can be taken both from animal based products and both plant based products,
mm,
as long as you do the right combination, the
yeah,
right timing, and of course in moderation. So, say for example, red meat. I know that a lot, even doctors actually are saying that red meat is bad. It's because if you look also at the medical journals, there are so many medical journals that are putting fingers against red meat. But our basic argument against that is that did they also check the amount of other foods that if those people are taking together with red meat? Because most people, whenever they eat red meat, it's
mm,
together with soft drinks, together with even alcohol,
yeah,
desserts, and for Asians, you can never eat red meat unless you are into low carb without rice. So
mm,
those are very biased researches. So
mm,
whenever we so with red meat, especially the organic, the humanely raised kind, the good
yeah,
kind of the grass fed red meat, actually they are one of the most important foods because
yeah.
as what Marty said, protein is very
Yeah.
important
You get
and
your
red meat,
bioavailable protein that's
yeah,
harder to get from plant-based foods, and you can get your
yeah.
nutrients. Some of the minerals are easy to get from the green, non-starchy veggies, but yeah, the protein from somewhere is really important.
Yes, and the proteins from meat is not just proteins. It is what we call as nutrient dense proteins because we
Mm,
can get B vitamins. You no longer need to take B1, B2, B3.
mm,
It's
mm,
all there. It's compact. Eggs
mm,
is another one of the best sources of B vitamins. And yes, you can really take them. And what is important is you take your protein intake with you together with your meal, and you can maximize your absorption of protein
mm,
usually if
yeah.
you divide your proteins. Instead of eating just one whole meal, you can
Mm,
divide it into two small meals and divide your protein intake
mm,
like in a 3 or 4 hour intervals. Do you also
mm,
follow that?
yeah. Yeah, and the meat and seafood is bioavailable compared to the soy protein or the pea
Yes,
protein, and
yes,
like if you're only getting your protein from plant-based sources, you have to eat a lot more of it and end up
Mm.
eating a lot more calories to get all the nutrients you need. There's a protein leverage hypothesis by some guys out of University of Sydney that's brilliant, that shows that every animal all over the world, regardless, they eat until they get enough protein. So if you've got low protein percentage foods or foods with low bioavailability, you keep on
Yeah.
eating until you get enough protein, and that's,
Yeah.
explains a lot of why we're obese these days, because our food system is optimized for, low cost
Convenient.
hyperpalatability
Yeah.
and not for protein. So everybody just potentially needs to dial up their protein percentage a little bit by dialing back the carbs and the fat. So once you dial back your carbs and your blood sugars are stable, then you can maybe dial back your fat, like you're saying, from the nuts or dairy, and
Mm-hmm.
allow the body fat to be used for fuel if you've still got some. And then once you've reached maintenance, you can then dial up the fat if you need the energy to run and move and grow and be really active.
Yeah, so those really are very, very important, especially that proteins is sometimes never mentioned when during low carb community. So it's always focusing on low carb, high fat, and sometimes protein is really not there in the picture. So we are
Or it's
emphasizing
even feared. A lot of people fear protein and they're worried about it, you know,
that.
bumping their ketones or, converting to glucose. But the reality is,
Mm,
if your blood sugar is going up after a high protein meal, you're very insulin resistant and probably need to prioritize
mm,
protein even more, because you're
mm.
losing all that protein to glucose in your blood, and you end up eating more to make up for that.
Yes. And whenever you said about bioavailability, so guys,
Mm,
bioavailability is the amount of food that your body actually absorbs. So
mm,
even if, say, for example, a certain amount of nuts or soy, I think I want to make use of soy because people into low carb who are not nutritionally dense low carb are
mm,
always okay with soy, thinking that it's almost like 100% protein. But yes, it may be 100% of proteins as compared to, say, for example, the same kilo of meat, but the
mm,
amount of protein that your body actually uses it, that absorbs from it,
mm,
is actually very less because our
mm,
body is not actually built to absorb that. And for those of you who do not know, soy actually is is a GMO, is a byproduct
mm,
of modern day foodstuff. It's actually not
mm.
so natural for us humans to be consuming soy on a day-to-day basis. So
Yeah, and
it
it
can
doesn't
be
come with
less
any
than half
as
of
many
the
nutrients as your whole food protein does either. So you're not getting all the other nutrients. You're just getting the pea or soy protein.
Yes, okay. So those are really important to make sure that what you are consuming is also a very, very good kind of protein. So I
Mm.
would like to take a pause and say hi to our viewers. So a lot of you loves Marty already. See, I told you you'd be very happy to meet him, and I'm so happy he agreed to have this invite. We also have Dr. Vin and Vic Legacy. So they are doctors from one of the provinces here in pulmonary
Lovely.
specialist actually, and also part of our LCF masterclass.
Oh,
So it's
cool.
really important for us to be knowledgeable and be more
Mm,
choosy when it comes to our food. So our
mm,
food need not just be low carb, but more importantly, it needs to be nutritionally dense. So
mm,
even the way Marty puts it, you don't even need to think if it's really low in sugar or whatnot. Just make sure
mm.
it's nutritionally dense, and you can
Yeah.
never go wrong with that.
Once
How
you're pursuing the
let me
nutrients you need from whole food without excess energy, all the other debates and beliefs and dogma just fall away, and it just becomes really simple as you chase the micronutrients you're struggling to get from your food. So if you're getting all the nutrients that you need from your food, the food just looks beautiful and healthy, and nobody argues that that's good food because it just looks and tastes amazing.
Yes, and I think I can share with you my own personal testimony that before I was just doing the regular 18 hours, 18/6 circadian fasting. So usually I can open my window at around 8, around 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I stop eating at around 6. But when I actually incorporated consciously whole nutrient dense foods,
Mm,
mostly devoid of processed food, I realized that with just two very light meals or just one regular
Mm,
meal, I feel satisfied. I no longer crave for more foods. I don't
yeah,
feel deprived. That even if I am accomplishing the same amount of length of time of fasting that I did before, but my whole psyche, my whole persona
yeah.
is feeling well fed and really satisfied that
And
I
you're
no
not trying to
longer.
restrain and hold back and
Yes,
feel this
yes,
guilt. You just, and like we are talking about soy before, but all those processed foods, if they're basically processed, they're pre-digested, so they just get assimilated into your body so much quicker, and you want to eat again sooner. So not only
yes,
do you absorb more of that energy, but without the nutrients, you want to eat again sooner. So yeah, it's just a vicious cycle. So if you can, try to
mm,
eat whole unprocessed foods and avoid anything that comes in a package that contains some form of seed oils with refined grains and refined sugars and colors
yeah,
and flavorings, and that's not real food that's going to nourish your body.
yeah. So, Marty, for practical purposes, I want to ask you something so that
Yeah.
our listeners here can try to imagine it on their plate. So, Filipinos really love to cook food that are almost burnt, okay? Or we are, I think for regular Filipinos, it's really a learned taste, learn acquired taste to love rare or even medium rare steak, okay?
Yep.
So because we are so used to overcooking everything, what can you
Yep.
say about overcooking meat?
Oh wow. Yeah, not too much. Cook it the way you enjoy it, but it's
How
more
about the
processing and
vitamins?
throwing a whole lot of other
Yes,
additives on
how about
top
the
that are going to
B
make you
vitamins in
eat a
there?
lot more. Yeah, and it definitely if you think of the ancestors who are eating raw meat after a kill, they've got all the juices and blood, and that's where all the vitamins are in the juices and blood in the whole food. So if you cook it to being burnt, you're going to lose all those vitamins because yeah, they are heat sensitive, and all the minerals are
Yeah.
contained in the juices in the meat. So you don't want to definitely don't want to cook it to the point of being charred, and you're just going to get that protein, and you've lost all the other vitamins and minerals through the heat and all the water going out of it.
So for me, actually, I've been having this somewhat very just general rule. Like whenever I eat greens, I try to eat them as raw as possible, and
Mm,
then the
definitely.
meat the meat I try to, if there's a steak available, so we can do rare steak. But so far, the most common here is just pork and chicken.
Yep.
And
Yep.
usually our favorite foods are usually the ones that are slow cooked until they almost break the bones. 4 hours, 6 hours. So, all the heat sensitive vitamins are really gone.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
try to
Yeah.
compensate maybe with a fresh green. So you think that could be enough, or we really need from time to time, or do we need to eat more of that to compensate?
I think mainly if you're getting the greens as well, you're probably doing okay. But yeah, I probably don't want to burn it to death. If you want to enjoy your food, and you don't want to get too micromanaging it. But yeah, definitely not. I don't think everybody needs to eat it raw, but not overcooking at the same time.
Yes. If you can share, what are your favorite, most nutritious foods?
Oh wow. We've got kangaroo here that I really enjoy, and it's a really
Oh,
cheap, nutrient dense, high protein meat that
oh,
just smashes my hunger, and it's just yeah, really enjoyable. I eat a lot of eggs. My wife makes me these amazing salads that I'll take to work, and throw some canned fish in with that, and I just really enjoy that. And it's good to have a regular routine of foods you enjoy, and then when I need the energy,
yes.
I'll go for some yogurt or something else that maybe it's a bit more energy dense after I've been active. And but over time, I've learnt to understand my cravings and when I need to eat more, I need to eat less, and what. It's nice when you get to the point where you say, well, I want to lose a bit of weight, or I've bulked up a bit too much, and now I need to prioritize the higher protein foods. And you can understand what you need when you need it, and you can listen to your body. And it's a fascinating process to look at the
Yes.
numbers and then look at your actual cravings and see how your kids approach food and see what they want to eat all the time when they're hungry and active, and what foods they go for. They go for the energy dense carbs and fat to replenish their energy. And it's just a fascinating insight, fascinating topic.
Yes. And I think with kids, part of that also because they're still growing and their
Mm,
metabolism really demands them to eat more of those insulin and at the same time energy dense foods
mm,
because they need it for growing. It's just
yeah.
that for those who are parents here, we can provide the same, but
Mm,
with nutrient dense qualities. Okay,
yeah.
so a lot of parents are saying that their children are not eating anything, but I asked, but how about if you give them a biscuit or a candy? And they said, yeah, they will eat that. So your
They
child is
definitely eat that.
actually
And they just hold out until they get
so
the donut and say, I'm looking at eat until I
yes.
get the donut. Okay.
So they really don't have a problem when it comes to like really accepting food, but it's just the choice of food. And I
Mm,
think it's very important for if we are having problems as adults now in training our body to eat nutritious foods, so we are passing it the same problem and even
mm,
worse if you don't start your children young.
mm.
So I know you have kids.
Yeah.
How did they accept this change in lifestyle or how are
Yeah,
they?
no, they're doing well. They've both learnt the value of whole food and real food and enjoying a family dinner. And luckily, my wife Monica's a really good cook, and she's learnt to cook for herself, but also the kids. And things are it's probably more carbs for the son, who's just a very active, growing. And he needs the fuel. But as as we get less active and more sedentary, and we're not really working out and running around all day, we need less fuel. So we need to dial that back. So yeah, it's just a useful metric to dial up and down the protein to energy ratio and say, do I need nutrients or do I need energy, and how am I gonna, you know, make sure I get the protein and the nutrients, the vitamins and minerals and the amino acids from protein without excess energy from the carbs and fats that I've got plenty on my body that I don't need anymore.
Yes. So I think we also need to emphasize on the variety of foods because
Mm,
for normal citizens, it's so hard to keep on thinking of if this food has magnesium and this food has potassium and this one. Know that foods actually have a lot of vitamins
mm,
and minerals in them. So it's
mm,
good that you know which ones are nutrient dense. Just do that, and then you can just cycle
mm,
whenever
mm,
they're available. You can eat as much of that and then the
yeah,
next and try to be more sensitive with your body and really listen to your
yeah,
body.
yeah. And once you get rid of those hyperpalatable junk foods that are hijacking all our senses, you can listen to your cravings. You can trust your cravings. You can say, "Oh, I feel like this protein food because I've been working out, or I feel like this wacky vegetable or whatever because I need those nutrients in that vegetable, or you need a bit more fat because you've been active and need to refuel. And after a while, you can actually trust your appetite and get back in touch with your
Mm,
true hunger signals, your true appetite, your true cravings, which are designed to keep you alive. It's an incredible system, and we've just started to tap it and understand it and quantify it. But it's just a really incredible thing. But then we hijack it with these processed junk foods, and I'm sure they're the same here as they are where you are as everywhere else in the world. That they're just manufactured foods, they're engineered foods to make us eat a whole lot more than we ever needed to.
yes. So yeah, that's really, really important. And my mother just sent a message that upon hearing the word kangaroo meat, it's almost unheard in the Philippines. But for a second later, I realized the guest is from Australia. And
Yes.
another said, Ayang Blanquera, me too. And I feel bad. They feel bad for the kangaroo. So
Yeah.
enlightenment, please, because
They're actually a
never
pest here. They're around the
there's too much of
farm.
them.
they because of all the agriculture and the grains and the crops, they just get to plague proportions, and they actually get rid of a few and they end up being eaten. But yeah,
Okay.
beef and fish and
So,
everything else is great too.
so for us who have never tasted a kangaroo, can you tell us which one it is closest to when it comes to
Uh,
taste?
I suppose it's
Beef,
like a kangaroo
chicken,
is like a beef. It's like it's a red meat, but
red meat.
it's a very tough, chewy, robust flavor. That's just
Oh,
because it's basically a wild game meat. It's just full of flavor, but very
you really love kangaroo.
chewy and satiating. You just eat it and you go, my hunger's switched off because it's 80-90% protein. So
Okay, okay. So thank you for that. At least we have some idea on
you've all
how
learned
it is
something tonight
like.
about kangaroo.
Yeah, because in here, whenever people is coming from Australia, they is it a kangaroo or no, the other one? What's the other uh animal that's endemic in Australia? The
Oh,
one
the
koala.
emu, koala. No, we don't eat koalas.
Okay, okay. Thank God we don't eat koalas.
That'd be
Okay.
very uncool in Australia to eat koalas. They're very, very endangered.
Okay, so we have so many people watching us, so all over the
Oh,
world,
that's
from
very cool.
India, from Milan. We also have, I think, a while ago from Spain, and all over the Philippines, of course. New Zealand also. We
Well,
have, and favorite Dr. Gail Medalag is also a low carb doctor of
oh, lovely.
dietdoctor.com, and he
Cool.
said he is one of my fave. Hi, Marty and Doc. Marty and Dr. Neyman. See,
No,
you're her favorite, Dr.
Ted's great.
So
Ted's a great, mate.
yes, I'm so happy to. So Marty was able to speak actually in Low Carb Denver and many other
Mm,
big international events on low carb.
mm,
But again, I think what sets him apart is that we are not just looking into low carb alone on or sugar
mm,
alone. Although we use our blood glucose as
mm,
a primary gauge, if you're doing all right, that's just the basic, and I think that's a really good thing
mm,
because blood glucose monitoring glucometer is widely available. You can buy it
mm,
even without prescription in any drugstore, in any
mm,
pharmacy. So anybody
mm.
can do the data driven fasting if they
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
and do it on their own. But the most important thing that we have to emphasize really is nutrient dense foods. Okay.
Mm.
So what time is there now?
What? It's nearly 8 o'clock. So yeah.
It's almost 8 o'clock, and Marty, guys, is actually sleeping very, very early than most of us. Okay, so as much as we want him to be here for long, we only have around 8 minutes left before we can say goodbye. Marty, if you, what are the takeaways? I know this is just actually just an introduction because we can't really expect to
Yeah.
talk so much in just a short time. But what's
Yeah,
the
no,
like?
it's been really fun to have a chat and get to know you. And I love your enthusiasm. You've just got this amazing passion to share all this with amazing people who want to follow you and learn from you. Yeah, just eat real food is the number one. Nourish your body with the nutrients it needs, and try to dial in, understand how to optimize your diet for your current needs. There's no one diet that works for everybody. We've got recipe books from Dr. Neyman's high PE ratio, which is really high protein, the kangaroo type thing, to therapeutic keto, which is on the other extreme for people managing epilepsy and
Yeah.
everything in between. So
Mm,
you can understand and design a diet to suit your actual needs at the moment, whether you need to stabilize blood sugars or lose body fat or grow to as a bodybuilder or to be very active and fuel for a lot of activity. And yeah, I suppose we can use the different metrics and to dial that in to understand when you need to eat and what you need to eat. And there's sort of two important sides of the coin. So I suppose we tried to do the data driven fasting to dial in when to eat, and then nutrient density and satiety and insulin load to help you understand what to eat when you eat. So yeah, love people to check out data driven fasting. They can Google it. Maybe we can post a link later in the
yeah.
chat. We've got a free book you can download that's 150 50 pages and 40,000 words. Just all these people kept asking questions, so I kept answering them and dropping them into this document that's literally become a book. I've just learned a lot about diabetes and understanding blood sugars. That it's great that it's getting out there, and the understanding from my wife that I've learned from watching her insulin and blood sugars all day can benefit other people. And it's just really a cool, fun journey to see it overflowing into these sort of events where I get to chat with people from the Philippines about my little hobby that got out of control.
Yes, and actually, we have one question here. Let's just
Yeah.
entertain. The others are just very happy you're here. So, Eileen said, asking for advice on people who are running at least 10 kilometers every day in terms
Oh, well
of
done.
low carb food to take. Should we eat more meat or combination of meat and vegetables? Thanks.
Well, at that point, you need, as a base, everybody needs the nutrition. So they need the protein from the meat, and the nutrients often come from the vegetables. But at that point, you can afford to add more fat to your diet, because you're going to need more energy, and you can't overeat protein. There's a limit to how much protein you can eat, so you're going to need to add more fat. But if you're not one of those people that are running 10 kilometers a day, maybe it's time to dial back the dietary fat if you've got body fat to lose. So it's just a matter of tweaking it, not running from one extreme to the other overnight, because that's unsustainable. It's just, what am I doing now? Let me dial that in a little bit more. How does that feel? Am I making progress? Let's tweak it a little bit more. And that's sort of the optimization approach. And most people want to jump from one extreme to the other and go, oh, I failed. I couldn't do that because, it didn't feel good. I fell off the wagon. I felt hungry. But you just need to understand how to tweak the knobs to move in the direction you want to go.
Yes. So it's more on being really conscious with your body and knowing how your body responds to those foods, and also you can base your own personal performance, how well you're doing after this. I think since we cannot do it on a strict monitoring way, we have to test it ourselves. But at least we do the basics of avoiding foods that are high in calorie, very low in in nutrients, and just highly palatable and very low in satiety level. So those could be the
Definitely
worst
perfect.
combination. So if we can avoid those and try to move into more nutrient dense foods, I think we can have better gauges as we become more sensitive to different foods. So before we end, I would also like to emphasize because a lot of people got glucometer. They just don't know how to
Yeah.
use it. They
Yeah.
have glucometer, but just the fact that they know that, that's all. But you can maximize this. You can
Yeah.
maximize by your overnight, how to and your overnight fast, for example. You can try to look into, always have a food diary, know how the impact of previous nights, also including the last time that you ate. Also, your hunger trigger, what level is your hunger trigger level, and how you can slowly lower it to normal levels, slowly ease in, move in, and also your 1 hour. Do you usually recommend 1 hour postprandial, post meal
Yeah,
monitoring?
it's good to check your 1 or 2 hour after you eat to make sure it doesn't raise by more than maybe 30 milligrams per
Okay.
deciliter. I think a lot of people in low carb keto try to flatline it, but that ends up just drinking oil and fat, and that isn't as satiating as it really needs to be to achieve their body fat goals. So some
Yes,
healthy level of fluctuation, but you don't want to see foods raise your blood sugar really high and take forever to come back
yes,
down, because you don't get
yes.
to eat again, and those foods just refill
Yeah,
your
it's just a
fat
vicious
and
cycle.
glucose fuel tanks and raise your insulin, and that's what leads to fat gain.
Okay. So yes, that is really important because standard medicine usually it's okay to have a after meal glucose of as long as it's less than 200. And for me, that's really too low.
It's not
So
healthy,
yeah,
no.
I know. So usually, ideally, since we are already about to end, ideally you don't eat if your blood sugar is around at least around 90, right? 90 to 100 maybe. So or even lower if you can. It will depend on your tolerance.
Yeah,
Okay, but don't ever. But just that's just a rough target to have a pre-meal blood glucose of 90. Once you are already slowly adapted, of course,
Yeah.
the by two,
But,
by
but
three.
take it
So, for
from where you
example,
are now and slowly drop
yeah,
it down.
slowly.
Don't
Don't
go, oh,
ever
I'm 130, I need to get
yes,
80 tomorrow. By, you'll just end up rebound binging, and your lizard brain, your
yes,
amygdala will just drive you to binge on donuts at the end of that, and there's no stopping that. So the whole
yes,
thing about data-driven fasting is just finding the routine that works for you and
yes,
understanding your hunger, so you slowly lower that down.
yes. And if ever, since more of our listeners actually not so beginners, a lot of them are actually pros. And this one is just as what I say, it's always fine tuning, and it's really
Yeah.
good to always have this kind of insight, fine tune what we already are
Mm.
doing. So what Marty said is that post meal, maybe you can have an increase of about 20 to 30. So if
Mm.
you add that from 90, your maximum postprandial or
Mm.
post meal blood glucose is just 120. So
Mm.
even if it's post meal, you will never be classified as diabetic because
Mm. No,
diabetic is
no, no, no.
more than 125 ever. So your HbA1c, the one that we are looking into every 3 months average, will surely be on the
Mm.
okay level. You'll never
Yeah,
get to be worried about them. So there's
yeah.
so many here, so many
This has been
people from
great.
Singapore. Yes, from Sydney, Australia. Somebody from Sydney, Australia. And just one question, okay? Is it okay? Is consuming
Yes.
powdered greens the same thing as the real one?
Not really.
Okay.
It's good, but not optimal, just because it doesn't give you the same satiety value. It's a processed food, so it won't make you feel as full and
Yes.
satisfied in the same
And I
way.
really
It's
feel
sort of
that
more of a supplement.
the act of
Yeah,
chewing and mastication
yeah,
also gives a lot of satisfaction.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
So I think that's it. I don't want to keep you any longer. I know it's way past your bedtime, but thank you so much. And just like one of the followers here, and also I think we've talked about it. Don't worry, we are planning into collaborating in any way we can so
Oh,
that we can
cool.
reach more
That'd
people.
be
Right,
awesome.
Marty? Or
Yeah, that'd be,
are you
that'd be
you
awesome.
cornered?
I'd love people to check out the Data Driven Fasting book,
Yes.
which you can download for free. So I'd love you to check that out.
Thank
And
you.
really
Okay,
appreciate your
we will
time.
have it. Yes,
Yeah.
data-driven fasting and also optimizing nutrition. And Marty got two page, I think, the optimizing nutrition and also the Marty Kendall page, or you don't have
Yep.
a separate page.
Yeah, Data Driven Fasting and Optimizing Nutrition. And you can also
Okay.
check out Nutrient Optimizer, all
Ah,
three
yeah,
different tools
and
that we use.
nutrient booster, right? Is it
Yeah,
nutrient
yeah, the
booster?
whole lot of really cool tools that we made to help people dial in their nutrition. They'll
Okay.
find it all if they check out the Optimizing Nutrition page.
Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much. I am happy you can just see the comments later. You know how happy they are to have you to finally see another face and no other than the great Marty Kendall. So thank you and have a very good evening. And we hope to see you again sometime soon when your time can allow. God bless you,
Thank you
Marty.
so
Thank
much,
you. Thank
Grace.
you, guys. Thank you so
Absolute
much.
pleasure.
Bye bye.
Bye. And